Hi, everyone. So we're really excited to have this panel today. Female-focused healthcare is something that is a very crucial area for so many people, and yet when it comes to investment, it's still an area that is lacking in the same sort of funding that other parts of the healthcare and health tech areas have. So on stage with me today, I have Sita, the founder and general partner of Siam Capital, and Laura Katz, the founder and CEO of Helena. And I would like to talk to both of you today about Femtech, about investment, and about where you see this area going. But firstly, I'd like you both to introduce what you do and why you think there is currently this funding gap when it comes to Femtech.
Thanks, Aggie. We invest in transformative technology that betters people and planet, in short. Specifically, opportunities that sit at the intersection of sustainability, consumer technology, which is why we're so excited today to talk about issues around female health. But to answer your question, I think it's important to first address and highlight that the very issue itself of calling this opportunity, if you will, Femtech is an issue, because in many ways it alludes to the fact that it's an issue that only impacts a small pocket or subset of the population. That's obviously not true. I mean, look around. We make up for more than half of this room right now. And I think the other downside of siloing the opportunity from a health space is that it doesn't get enough attention, be it from the funding side or from, frankly, the scientific community, to address these issues that are very much relevant. I'll let Laura chat more about some of the opportunities that touch specifically infant formula, but take the issue of fertility. We were just chatting about this off stage. It impacts more than 1 in every 6 families. That's not a female health issue. That's a reproductive health issue. And a reproductive health issue impacts all of us. So I think in many ways, we really need to start by trying to address why we keep trying to silo female health as Femtech, as if it's some sort of siloed niche in the market, when that's, you all know, not very much the case at all.
Yep. Hard to follow that. 100% agree with Sita. So I'm Laura Katz, founder and CEO of Helena. What we do is recreate the proteins found in human breast milk, and we're taking these proteins that we make that are identical to what's found in breast milk, and we're creating the most human-like infant formula with the goal of empowering parents, specifically mothers who either choose not to breastfeed or can't breastfeed, with a product that more closely matches the immune properties in breast milk. And to answer your question, why is there this gap? You know, exactly what Sita said, this is a health concern. It's not Femtech. We're talking about women's health. That's 50% of the population. And the gap that we see in funding and in these companies really becoming successful has to do with the profile of a lot of the investors that we can access as founders, where these issues are not top of mind when many of the investors we're talking to don't have to deal with this stuff day in and day out. And seeing more diverse representation within the VC world and wherever you are accessing capital will be really helpful to companies who are looking to advance the field. And that's why we work with Sita. We have Sita on our board at Helena because we know that having representation of people who can really understand the pain point of whatever it is that happens throughout the life cycle of women's health is going to be quite critical.
And when we're looking at Femtech or healthcare focused on women, there is an aspect of it as well, which is that this is future focused as well, like many of the topics that we're looking at Web Summit. And I'm interested in talking to you about where you see this space going in the next 5 to 10 years, what you think the challenges will be and what you think the investment opportunities will be. Because if we look at, for instance, the area that you work in, we saw a formula crisis in the United States this year, which for many people would have been an unprecedented challenge for a country as wealthy as the US, and yet it still became something that is seen as relevant. And I know you also touched on fertility. So I was just wondering what you think the challenges are that are going to be relevant for this space in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, we're limited on time, so I'll start with the 2 root causes that we were just discussing. It really boils down to 2 things. One is the awareness of the issue. There's been proven studies and a lot of data to back that the female anatomy has not been studied as much as the male anatomy. So just by definition, we have less knowledge of what impacts our health. As a result, we have less opportunities to create proactive solutions that will impact half the pocket of the population. And to draw on my earlier point around the fact that it shouldn't just be called female health or women's health, the problem Helena was just referring to is it's not a women's health or a mother's health issue. It's a nutrition issue. It's a children's issue because we're all feeding the most vulnerable pockets of the population. So in short, it's the first part of the coin is really about developing this awareness. That's sort of the first step that we're starting to see strides in that direction, but we need a lot more awareness to kickstart the flywheel of what really discovering what some of those issues are. The other part of the coin that I think can't be understated is the availability and the abundance of data. It sort of leads into the problem around awareness, but without the proper data, it's also hard for us to create real businesses that are venture backable. Drawing on the example of fertility, there are two companies that I found to be really impressive. One that is tackling it from the Femtech angle, the other that's tackling it from the data angle. So there's a company in the US called Alife Health. They're essentially trying to build predictability in data models to understand what are the IVF's chances of success. They're building infrastructure for clinics. Gaia, which is a company based here in the UK, they're trying to leverage data to understand how can we create more reliability in the financial planning for families if they were to go through the IVF route. How do they know how many cycles do they need to go through? All of that to say is that it all starts and somewhat ends with data. But we can't go through and discover the data if we don't even have the awareness of what some of those problems are. We don't know how we all function or behave differently. So this is not sort of the doomsday response, but I think that it's really trying to get us all on the same page of let's stop talking about female health as women's health. Let's talk about it as health.
That's a very good point. And yeah, just going to you, do you think that there is something which is essentially a solution alongside what you're looking at with formula as other aspects of this sort of healthcare?
In the next 5 to 10 years, as we see the future within this space and within health that affects women and families, I kind of see this as two different ways of this is going to go. One is infrastructure. So what we're doing is humanizing infant formula as well as other products where we can be bringing immune properties of breast milk to improve nutrition along the life cycle from early life to end of life nutrition. But we can be building infrastructure that generally empowers women and parents across that whole family planning category. So whether that means for fertility, whether that means places to pump. I mean, that's not such a difficult thing, but as somebody who's currently pumping right now, it's difficult to find where to go. And these are all tools, small tools that we can embed within our culture to support women throughout their health journey. And then I would also say within the next 5 to 10 years of where I think innovation is going from the health tech startup scene, it's thinking about health for women, not just at fertility, not just at family planning, but throughout the life. So we were talking about backstage menopause and what we know and what we really don't know about what that means for women's health, and being able to support women with new tools and technology that actually empower them to live their life however they want is what we really need. So that's what we're going to be seeing in the next 5 to 10 years, I hope.
And both of you have already touched on the topic of data and the lack thereof. There have been whole books written about the fact that there is just not the data available when it comes to women's bodies. And what I would be really interested to hear from you is not just a question of, we know there's a lack of data, but also when it comes to the quality of the data you have, how can people ensure that what they're actually getting is reasonable sample sizes, and also what you need in order to develop products that are important, but also from a consumer focus, because as someone who is seeking investment, how can a company seek investment without the evidence that these are things that women actually want and need?
Yeah. Here's a scary fact. I just shared it with Aggie off stage, and I think that she gasped a little. Most women weren't actually included in clinical trials for medication or prescriptions that are designed specifically for women until the late 90s. Think about that. So if we were to answer the question, to be very blunt, what is the quality of the data? It's pretty damn.
Yeah.
How do we fix it? We have to go back and go understand, what have we built this health system on? We need to start, not to just keep drawing on and hammering on the earlier point, is we need to really understand what it means to be able to create solutions, long-term healthcare solutions for all spectrums of the population. And that starts by also really enriching the data that we have, creating and increasing our sample size. And you bring up a great point. At the end of the day, no investor is going to invest in a space because it's quote unquote the right thing to do. We're here to drive returns. And we need to be able to demonstrate that funding and investing in this space will produce those returns, because we're in many ways answering a funding gap, and in many ways are going after a broken market system. And I think there's no short or easy answer, but it probably has something to do with increased collaboration between the public and the private sector, more participation from the academic communities, and also just more capital incentives. I'll give a more salacious example, if you will, is the topic of sexual health. It is a widely explored topic for men, less so for women, but now a lot of companies are starting to deploy real capital in this space because they realize that there's a buying market for it. So I think it's quite simple. If you want to move the mouse, you kind of got to move the cheese.
Something that we are seeing right now, starting Helena years ago, it was really clear to me as a food scientist that there's all of this innovation going into alternative dairy and alternative meat, but what's happening within this category that we use to feed babies? And everybody in this room has eaten breast milk or infant formula at one point in our life. And now with the shortages in the US, people are really starting to see what's going on. As Sita said, it's becoming more clear and crystal why this is such an important opportunity to invest in. And even a few years ago, people didn't really understand, oh, this is an expansive market. There's so much that we can do. And yes, you will get your return as an investor. That's my job to make sure that we can do that. But when we talk about data and making sure that we have good quality data to support the investment coming into the category, the clinical data is really important. So we're planning a clinical study right now, and we're doing it in a population where it's quite difficult to plan a clinical study. That's in infants. And it's much easier, much cheaper to run clinical studies with big groups of people if it's men aged 18 to 35. They're not childbearing, and they of course can't be, and they're not within that age. And you can do that much more efficiently, but that's not going to answer the whole question. And to be able to take on these big challenges, to run clinical studies and really collect quality data so that we can understand what drugs and food and anything that goes into or treats a woman's body and know what that means is going to have to be the future. So collecting that data and having more ambitious people, more female CEOs and female leadership on the side to have that perspective is going to be important to push that forward.
And also, what we're talking about here is also something which affects a broad swath of the population, and also is not just something that is purely a business opportunity. It has clear, tangible benefits, and scientific research needs to go into these areas. And so I'm curious as to whether you think there are also other channels, not just VC money, funding from private investors. What are the sort of channels that this sort of sector can tap into beyond what is available from private finance?
I can start with that. So VC capital is great if you're building the type of company that will get the returns a VC is looking for, but that's not the only place that you can access capital. speaking and engaging with government, whether it's grants, whether it's working with local policymakers. We have actually recently, with the formula shortage, people have reached out to us, local policymakers who are interested in creating new funds for R&D for infant nutrition and for women's health broadly. So those are really great places to make connections with and building that community. And there's also a lot of philanthropic funds that are interested in funding that research, and specifically things like clinical data, that it's long timelines, it's a lot of money to run clinical studies, and some VCs are just not on that type of timeline, and so working with those folks is also a really great way to access capital.
I think it's, to highlight your point, Laura, it's very important to be able to bifurcate the issue of whether or not this is a venture backable business, or if this is a good problem to solve because it's the right problem to solve. And not to say that VCs don't care about the right problems, of course we do, but we also have a fiduciary duty to drive returns. I think the more interesting and a more immediate challenge is how do we actually, in many ways, educate the venture capital industry to start to be able to decipher and, in many ways, pick up on some of these opportunities that may seem like non-venture backable businesses, but are. And it's simply a fact that we just don't have the awareness or the data or the knowledge that they are businesses that have great market opportunity. Laura and I talk about this all the time. So we met a while ago, and when she was out discussing this massive issue around the infant formula crisis, most people, asked her or me, these are verbatim real questions that we received, which was, why don't all women just breastfeed?
Yep.
How big is the infant formula market? Why does there need to be any change if these companies are already owning the market? I think anyone in the last year has picked up headlines, has realized that we went through, in the US, a massive infant formula crisis. And it shouldn't take a crisis that has, not to be so explicit, but really put lives on the line for us to realize that we're not paying enough attention to this space. And that's our whole job. What we're supposed to do is we're supposed to find undervalued opportunities, overlooked areas, so that we can put capital to work. And that's what we're hoping to do. And hopefully Helena is just the start.
Yeah, someone once asked me, well, why can't women just get wet nurses? And it was a VC, and I think it was too far gone, that conversation. It's hard to explain, well, that doesn't really exist anymore, and we need better solutions.
Thank you, both of you. This has been a really interesting conversation. And
Thank you,
like
Aggie.
you say, I
Thanks,
think
Aggie.
there's a big question still when it comes to diversity, not only from the health tech side, but also from the VC side, and what that diversity really means for improving this sort of science and improving investment in it as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.